Lesson 9.3, Collecting Data. Alright, so if we're going to collect data, we have to do a statistical study. Step 1, identify the variable of interest and the population. If you don't know what you're studying, it's really hard to do the study. Number 2, choose a sample that represents the population, because the population is probably huge. So you need to somehow choose a sample, a smaller group that you can actually study. Then you collect your data, and then you organize and describe the data using a statistic. And then from that statistic you can interpret the data, make inferences, and draw conclusions about the entire population. So, said you needed to pick a sample. What types of samples are there? Well, the best type is random, where each member is equally likely to be selected. But there's other types that are self-selected, or in other words, the members volunteer. This actually happens a lot. Every time a store asks you to, or a restaurant asks you to fill out a survey, you have to volunteer to do that. They can't make you do that. So that would be an example of self-selected. Systematic is a rule used to choose the members. So let's say the restaurant wants you to fill out a survey. Every 10th person that orders, they hold the food until they see that you submitted the survey, or something like that. So there's this rule that makes you fill out the survey. There's also stratified. The population gets divided into groups, and then the members are randomly chosen from each group. So maybe you choose little kids, teenagers, and adults, or something like that, and then you randomly choose from each of those groups. Cluster. Population is divided into groups, and then the entire clusters are chosen randomly. So maybe it's you take a neighborhood and divide it by blocks. So each block is a cluster, and then you just survey a block. And then convenience, where you just choose the members that are easy to reach. So let's say you want to determine whether people in your neighborhood like the new social media website that provides neighborhood updates. Identify the type of sample described. So part A, you ask all the people who live on your block. Well, your block, that's close to home. That is convenience. This is just the people nearby, easy to get to. How about if you randomly select a person from each block in the neighborhood? All right, so here you've divided the neighborhood into blocks, and then you're randomly choosing one person from each of those blocks. So you've grouped them, and then you're randomly selecting from the group. That is stratified. You email questionnaires and use only the questionnaires that are returned. Well, do the people have to fill out the questionnaires? No, it is self-selected. People don't have to do it. They have to volunteer to do it. Then it's self-selected. And part D, you divide the people in your neighborhood according to even and odd house numbers. So you've made them into groups, and then you select all the people with an even house number. So you divided them into groups, and then you selected all the people from one of the groups. So you just selected one of the groups. That is cluster. Why don't you try number 1? Pause while you read it and answer it. When you're done, it should be self-selected. All right, so those were different ways to find samples, but which sample is best? Well, we have to look at bias. Bias is an error that results from a sample that misrepresents the population. So we would like an unbiased sample, because that is representative of the entire population. The latest presidential elections have had issues in that their sampling for their polls were biased. They didn't give the real picture. A biased sample over or underrepresents a part of the population. So we want an unbiased sample. So which types of samples give us the unbiased? Well, unbiased is random. So whatever seems to give the most randomness, most representative of the whole population is what we want. So in these situations, let's identify the type of sample and explain why the sample is biased. So the principal asked students at one lunch table about the quality of the food served at the school's cafeteria. All right, so what type of sample? Well, it appears like we've grouped by lunch tables. So we've grouped, and then we've asked all the students at just one of those groups. So we grouped and then chose one of the groups. That is cluster sampling. And why is it biased? Well, usually all the students who are together at a table think alike, but they may be different than the students at other tables. So this table, all the students in one table think alike, which is different than the students at the other table. So the students one table are friends and similar. They may be different than other tables. Let's try another one. A sports announcer wants to know how often people in the town attend community sporting events. So she asks every 10th person who enters the field to watch the local soccer game. All right, so every 10th person. Well, that seems like a rule. So a rule is systematic. And systematic is very often unbiased. But why is it biased here? Because you're only asking people at a community sporting event. They are likely to have a different opinion than the people who don't go to the sporting events. So if you want to, how often does community attend? Well, you have to ask the entire community, not just those who attend. Why don't you try number 5? Pause it while you try it. And your answer should be convenience. And it's biased because dog owners probably have strong feelings about dogs. All right, let's say you're a member of the school's banquet committee. You want to poll the members of the senior class to find out where the banquet should be held. There are 75 students in the senior class. Describe a method for selecting a random sample of 40 seniors to poll. Well, all kinds of different ways. How about this way? We could take a list of seniors and assign each a number from 1 to 75. Then use a calculator or technology to pick random numbers. That's one way. That'd be random. Why don't you try number 15? Pause it while you figure it out. Oh wait, it's about the same. Assign each student a number and randomly use a random number generator to select the students. All right, so we've gone over the samples and how to put together samples, but then we have to collect the data. So how do we collect the data? We could do an experiment, which we put a treatment on a sample. So in other words, an experiment is you give certain people the experimental drug, the other people don't get that. That's an experiment. Observational survey, you just observe the sample. We want to study orangutans. So you go and you watch orangutans. You could survey, you could ask some questions, or a simulation where you could use a model to represent or reproduce the situation you want to study. You know, like a volcano erupting or a hurricane hitting. I mean, you don't want those to happen in real life, so you simulate it. So let's identify the method of data collection described in each situation. A teacher records how many students turn in their homework as they enter the classroom. Is the teacher doing anything to the students? No. The teacher's just watching and recording. Watching and recording is observation, and teachers do that a lot. How about a manager uses a computer to estimate the number of defective products that will be produced by a particular assembly line? So we use a computer program. That would be a simulation. Simulations are usually cheaper to put together than the real thing. Why don't you try number 17? Pause this video while you read it and answer it. Should be a simulation. A town supervisor surveys residents of the town by asking, should the town build a playground and a dog area in the park on Main Street? Explain why the question may be biased or otherwise introduce bias into the survey. Then describe a way to correct the flaw. Well, what do you see wrong with that question? Here's what's wrong. The and. We're actually asking two questions. So what is wrong? It asks two questions. All right, so how could we fix? We could fix it by asking two separate questions. Why don't you try number 23? Pause this while you answer it. And the answer should be, the child may influence. The answer about a children's hospital. Of course, the people are going to say yes to the kid. They're going to look at you with big sad eyes, and you'll say, parent, and they'd also say, yep. Instead, they should provide a way to answer anonymously without the kid asking and recording.